Have you ever considered investing in alternative investments, such as coffee farms? In this week's episode, we're going to talk about all things coffee because I'm bringing on Josh Ziegelbaum as a guest. Josh is the Director of Investment Relations at Legacy Group. Legacy Group is an alternative investment manager that operates Green Coffee Company, which is a portfolio company that produces coffee in Medellin, Colombia. In the episode, we talk about the supply chain of getting coffee from the farm to basically the coffee I'm drinking right now. We also talk about potential investment opportunities if you were to invest with Josh's firm. No part of this is investment advice or a solicitation to invest. It's purely for educational and entertainment purposes only. Introducing the Director of Investment Relations at Legacy Group, Josh Ziegelbaum. Welcome to the Vijay Kailash Show. On today's episode, I'm excited to have Josh Ziegelbaum join us. He is Director of Investor Relations at Legacy Group. Josh, welcome to the show.
Vijay, thanks for having me on the show. It's great to be here and speak with you today.
Hey, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Today, we're going to be talking about alternative investments, specifically in the Latin American region. And, I like Latin America. I just don't know anything about the business side or the investment opportunities there, right? All my investment focus has been in the United States and kind of domestic. And so really looking forward to this conversation. So let's get started. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you even got into this space?
Sure. Let me go back close to the beginning. I was born and raised in New Jersey, central New Jersey, and I went to college at Rutgers University, studied economics, and out of school, immediately started in financial services. First, brief stint in insurance. Then I got into banking. So I worked at Wells Fargo and Wells Fargo Advisors for about 6 years, both in New Jersey and then down in Miami Beach. Back in 2018, I had the opportunity to do a lateral transfer and come down to Miami with my wife. And my role at the time was a private banker. So I was managing relationships with high net worth individuals and business owners, helping them with banking products. So whether that be investments, loans, business and personal, kind of all things personal and business banking is what I did. So I was Series 7 licensed. So I had kind of dabbled in the securities industry there at Wells Fargo. I kind of soon realized after some time that I wasn't incredibly passionate about the work I was doing. I wanted something a bit more dynamic and exciting. I saw a lot of parallels in our bank and others and seeing that we had similar products, and there's nothing that really differentiated us. So I ended up doing some soul searching and found the guys I work with today. So first I was working as VP of capital raising, vice president of capital raising and business development at a small private equity firm focusing on deals in Latin America. At that firm, I met the guys I work with today, Cole Shepard and Adam Jason. And about 2 years ago, we wanted to go all in on Legacy Group and Green Coffee Company. It's a company that's been around for some time. So they've been around since 2017, but I came in as Director of Investor Relations back in 2021. And it's been an excellent 2 years. And what I do is I manage the capital raising process and investor relations for our portfolio companies. We focus heavily on Latin America, specifically on Latin America, and bring in those investment opportunities to our high net worth investors in the U.S. So with my background, kind of managing those relationships here, it was something very comfortable for me. Obviously, a different product, being private equity, but we're an asset manager. I currently have just over 400 investors. I manage those relationships here out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. That's where I live and work currently. And my colleague, our associate of investor relations, also lives and works down here. But the rest of the team is in Medellin, Colombia. That's where we're headquartered. That's where our investments are made. There in that region. So we have boots on the ground, and it's really interesting thing that we're doing. And I'd love to dive more into that as we get through the chat. But that's how I got here, and that's what I do.
That's incredible. So 10 years ago, would you have imagined this is what your career would be?
Absolutely not. When I was just finishing college 10 years ago, I'm 33 at the time of this recording, at least. I was just out of college and I had ambitions to become a trader. I wanted to work on Wall Street. Quickly realized that wasn't the life for me. I'm enjoying the sun and casuality of South Florida, and I love working
in Medellin. Yeah.
Medellin, a whole nother world. So never thought that private markets would open to me. I was very focused on public markets kind of coming out of school. It's what I was passionate about, but that soon changed. So I definitely would not have expected that, but super happy to be where I am today and very grateful for the opportunities I've had to be here.
That's really interesting because I focus primarily on the public market, specifically in the derivative space. And it's really interesting that you realized Wall Street wasn't for you. I realized it wasn't for me either. So I started up my own fund. And you also joined a fund to specialize in alternative investments in Colombia. So I'd love to transition the conversation that way a little bit more and talk about why specifically coffee, and did this, which came first, the legacy group or this investment that you raised capital for?
They were birthed almost at the same time. So back in 2017, the founding partner of the investment Green Coffee Company, who's the founding partner of Legacy Group, Cole Shepard, who's also a board member and founder of Green Coffee Company, was birthed right around the same time. So Legacy Group is the asset manager for this specific deal. And he wanted to bring investment opportunities to U.S. investors, typically those that invest in real estate. So we were looking for alternative products where guys that usually invest in apartment building deals or self-storage or collateralized real estate deals can get exposure to another market in a very similar manner. So he had this idea to buy some farmland, coffee being the national product of Colombia. Makes a lot of sense, and it's one that has global demand, and he noticed that there was arbitrage-like opportunity for acquisitions. His background is in mergers and acquisitions, worked for PwC for a number of years. So when he traveled down to Colombia, he saw that it was a market ripe with opportunities, and kind of saw some people that were doing other things in agriculture, saw that it was an industry that we wanted to be in, and the project was born. So we initiated a seed funding round in 2018. We brought in 5.7 million of equity capital on a thesis of buying up some coffee farmland and selling green coffee, which is unroasted yet processed coffee. Fast forward to where we are today, we've done 4 formal funding rounds. We're currently in our Series C. We brought in over 50 million in equity, and we built the company to be the number 1 largest coffee producer in the country of Colombia. We have over 7,000 acres and 8 million coffee trees, top line revenue of over $10 million last year. It's grown into a monster, and we have a goal of taking the company public in 2026. We have a U.S. structure, so investors get common equity here in the States. But the thesis was, farmland is a great hedge against inflation. There's arbitrage-like opportunities for acquisitions where we could buy below market, apply kind of first world development tactics to our business, bring in talent. It's a talent-heavy company. We have over 400 full-time employees, and we really just built an enterprise out of this. So it started as an idea to pay off cash flow on farmland, and it's grown to be the largest coffee producer in Colombia 5 years later.
That is incredible. Congratulations. IPO in what, 3 years? 3 more years. That's really exciting. So when it comes to coffee, I mean, I love coffee. I'm drinking coffee right now during this interview. So could you talk a little bit more about the industry for someone who, I'm just a consumer. I know nothing about the business side of it. Could you talk about how, I guess, the competitive advantage between this specific company that you guys invest in compared to other competitors? Because Colombia has multiple coffee farms, I'm sure.
Of course, let's unpack that a bit. So coffee it's a fruit. So it's a tree, and it's actually a cherry, in its natural form in nature. Something that a lot of people don't know, actually. So, and in Colombia, due to the topography of the land, it grows on mountains. So it's something that cannot be mechanized in terms of the picking process. It's all hand picked. So this is an industry that, even though it's very well known for its coffee, there's been a very big lack of investment, particularly foreign investment, into Colombian coffee. It's a lot of smaller landholding families that have owned properties for generations, and it'll get passed down, and they'll use techniques from decades ago, everything being handpicked, and then it goes through somewhat antiquated processing facilities, and then the commodity is sold in its unroasted form. So when we hear coffee and commodity prices, it's traded globally, typically in dollars, and it's traded you could trade roasted coffee, but when we talk commodity coffee, it's been stripped down from the cherry into its bean form. It's been processed, but not yet roasted. And that's what the commodity market is made of. It's that product. So our model today is containers, wholesale, B2B of unroasted green coffee. We call it green coffee or parchment. And that's kind of it goes from the smaller farm where it's handpicked by employees. It gets processed, in our case, through world-class processing facilities. We brought in tons of technology to make an automated method of processing cherries. It's the most advanced wet mill for processing coffee in all of Latin America. So we have a competitive advantage in the sense of the technology that we're bringing in. whether that's at the equipment in the facilities, the sensory equipment on the farms that monitor weather patterns, the talent that we have. We have a 25-year veteran of Colombian agriculture as our CEO, a former Fox Latin America executive as our CFO. We have a publicly traded U.S. company CEO as our senior advisor. So we have a stacked management team and advisory team that definitely sets us apart from any competition. And the people that I would say are competitors, or it's very limited because it's such a fragmented market. Like I said, with smaller players that are not investing in their farms, they're not scaling up to a commercial operation the size of we are, and we're doing something very unique and different in the industry based on how things have been done in the past.
I find that super fascinating. So as someone who knows, again, nothing about the industry, and that's why I'm asking all these questions, let's say you have this farm, you're processing the coffee. Could you walk us through the supply chain of how that company how I'm able to drink coffee right now during this interview? Could you kind of walk us through how everything works?
Yeah, so there'll be a smaller farmer. Let's say he owns a plot of land and he'll handpick his cherries, and he may not even have a processing facility of his own because he's just a smaller farmer. So he'll pick his cherries and he'll, in certain cases, sell them to a collective government buying group. And that group will buy cherries, they'll process them, and then the group, in certain cases, will export containers of unroasted coffee that's already been processed. It's usually goes to a trading house. So often there'll be like traders that buy it, and then they have end buyers who then roast it to then go to someone else. So in the case of, let's use us as an example, we process it ourselves. So it's handpicked, brought to our wet mill. It goes through the wet mill, goes through a drying process. We do quality control. So we do like rigorous testing to make sure it meets the needs of our end buyers. Then we send it over to the port. We get everything in order to ship it out. We have a sales contract lined up with an end buyer. So a lot of our buyers are in Europe or in the US. There'll be like specialty buyers that buy containers of unroasted, and they'll turn and sell it to someone else. So it'll go to that specialty buyer. They'll know a roaster. So pick your roaster. This trader will then sell it to a roaster. They'll take that container of green coffee, they'll roast it in their own proprietary equipment or through a third party, and then it's bagged in that facility. And then depending on the brand, pick your supermarket white label brand, even if they might not even necessarily have their own facility. So you probably think, well, I don't want to name names but like a grocer doesn't have a roaster, right? So what they do is they work with like a white labeler. It's like a company that roasts for them. They'll label it like it is XYZ brand, if it's not them doing it themselves. So it'll either be like their own roasting and labeling, or it'll be done through a third party. And then there's distribution channels where it goes to the stores and it goes to places where we buy it. Some roasters will then sell it directly to the consumer. So there's certain different models. So not everyone's like B2B, right? Some people will go more direct to consumer, but that's kind of it in a nutshell in terms of how things happen.
I think you explained that perfectly. I mean, I was able to just visualize everything you're saying. I mean, some of these words, I didn't know what it meant, but I'm like, okay, I think it kind of makes sense towards the end of it. So thanks so much for going through that. Could we talk a little bit more about the financial aspect of it? How much does it usually cost for a certain quantity of coffee? I don't even know what is coffee measured in quantity wise? Like there's bushels of wheat and barrels of oil, but what is coffee?
So you could sell it by the container. So it could be a container of coffee, or it could be sold by the pound. So the typical metrics that you're familiar with. Usually it'll be pound. So we'll say like, how much am I selling it for per pound? And then we'll negotiate a price and a quantity, and that's usually what it's traded in. So it's nothing too foreign to you or your listeners. And then a container is made up of a certain number of pounds, of course, depending on the product. But that's really the denomination that it's sold in.
Okay, so what is the cost per pound that you guys incur, and how much do you usually charge for it?
It depends. It costs us typically just under $2 a pound to produce at our farms. And we're talking unroasted coffee. And then we could sell it north of $2 a pound. So a healthy margin there, close to about a 30% margin on the sale. As you get into roasted, it costs more because you have to roast the coffee, of course. And part of our business plan as we grow is to get into roasted coffee. So we're building a proprietary roaster, where we're aiming to in the US, part of our business plan in the Series C, so we can go more vertical, get into roasted, and then sell containers of roasted at higher margins. So all in cost there is little bit north of $3 a pound to make a roasted pound. And then, wholesale, you're looking somewhere in the $5 range, $5 to $6 range. And then end consumers are paying $15,
Yeah.
$20 a pound.
Okay, so there's a healthy margin there. I love it. Just let's say I'm interested in investing in this. What would be the next step? Because and who can you legally even take on as clients as investors?
Yeah, great question, Vijay. So it's open to accredited investors only. So the offering, it's structured in the U.S. So the investment itself is common equity in Green Coffee Company Holdings in the United States. It's a Delaware LLC. That company owns all of the assets in Colombia. Everything flows up to that U.S.-based parent. So we make it as easy and frictionless as possible for U.S.-based investors to gain access to the market. They don't have to send their money to Colombia overseas. They invest here in the U.S. It's a very friendly structure, of course. We have a private placement memorandum, which we have our investors review, a detailed investor presentation. If someone wants to move forward, typically they're in our email newsletter, or they've been following us for a bit, or they were referred to us. They'll review our materials. They'll schedule a call with myself or someone on my team. We'll address any of their questions. We verify that they're accredited. We have a $100,000 minimum investment in Green Coffee Company. And we're forecasting, like I mentioned, that 2026 exit for our investors through sale, or more preferably a U.S. IPO. And it's made here in the U.S. It's a U.S.-based investment for investment purposes. It's a private equity structure. So we at Legacy Group are the outside asset manager. We're responsible for not only raising capital, but moving forward the business plan. We sit on the board on behalf of our passive investors. So as an investor, it would be a strictly passive role where you kind of believe in the management team and our thesis, and you're in for the ride along all of us. We're also heavily invested in the deal. We have $2.5 million of our own money in Green Coffee Company at Legacy Group, and we're incentivized to move this forward towards an exit. In terms of the financial returns that we're forecasting a 64% IRR through 2026, or an 11x net equity multiple on invested capital.
Josh, thanks so much for going through that. I do have a question. So, Green Coffee Company, it is, has the word green in it, probably relates to ESG. Could you talk a little bit more about impact investing?
Of course. So, we really believe in producing a high social and environmental impact for all stakeholders, whether that's in our employees, people who are invested with us. It's something that resonates with us as a brand and as a company. So, specific things that we're doing at Green Coffee Company, let me start with the social component. So we're employing people in a formal manner, over 400 full-time employees, like I mentioned, and we pay them with formal benefits. This might sound something normal for anyone listening in the U.S., but I can tell you in Colombian agriculture, even a lot of the parts of the world that are more developing markets and less developed markets that I would call emerging markets, they don't have formal employment in agriculture. So people are typically paid cash with no health insurance, no pensions, no benefits. We're changing that. So we give almost all of our employees health insurance. We offer them pensions, time off. If people are injured while working, we give them the proper health care. We're also employing single mothers who are heads of households. We have a whole initiative at our greenhouses that employs these women, and we put them in leadership positions. It's something really special. And when I go down and visit the farms, which I do several times a year, something that really resonates with me is the social impact and the way in which we're really lifting up the community with this investment. You can see that there's more schools now in the years that we've been there. The people in the town have more money to thrive and to invest in their own community. So it's really a snowball effect that we're seeing with the social impact lens that we're taking with this investment. Kind of switching gears to an environmental impact component, we do a lot of things around impact on the environmental side. We have a system for planting new trees, which eliminates plastics entirely. So we use biodegradable pods for planting new coffee trees in the ground, reducing tons of waste and plastics from the environment. We also reduce water, so we use significantly less water in our mills and in our farming methods than our competitors. We're always looking at ways to dispose waste in a sustainable manner, so we don't dump it in the river. We try and reuse products where we can. Part of the initiatives that we're focusing on in the Series C round and the build out of the company would be to reuse and monetize waste from coffee production. So part of the proceeds from the Series C round that we're in would be to build a distillery on site at our wet mills because more than half of the coffee cherry is discarded and it's trash and it's usually polluted in certain cases by other people. So we're looking to create ethanol from this waste and ultimately vodka and sell vodka at scale in a B2B manner to not only make money for our investors and unlock a new revenue stream, but to reduce waste in the environment and make it a more sustainable process of doing business. So there's a lot going on impact. We have an entire presentation on it, which I'd be happy to share with anyone who'd like to see a deck on it. But impact investing is really important to us. And those are a few of the things that we're doing at Green Coffee Company.
I think that's really great. I know a lot of people, they invest for financial rewards, but at the end of the day, it's also like, hey, are we taking care of everyone that is involved, right? It's like you don't want to just go after the money. You want to make sure you're creating positive impact and helping others, building a better community and basically leaving the earth better than you found it. Unfortunately, not every corporation's on board with that. So I do really appreciate your company going through and being very thoughtful on the impact side.
Yeah, thanks, BJ. And before we shift gears on the topic, there's also a financial component to this because one, it's the right thing to do, of course, right? And we can get behind it from a social good perspective. But as we look to do a public market transaction in the future or sell the company, these initiatives have inherent value to them. So we're going to be looked at under a lens of scrutiny as we go to do a public market transaction. And the stakeholders then will want to know, what are you doing on social programs or social impact? How are you treating your employees? How are you planting the trees and what methods are you using? What is the impact you're having? Companies that we've seen that are doing things in a more sustainable manner are rewarded with higher valuations and higher financial returns for the earlier investors.
That's really wonderful. Could we talk a little bit more about the using the waste to create ethanol and vodka? And have you guys already started that, or is this just a thought that's in the potential future?
We've already started it. We have our test distillery. It opened last month in February 2023.
Wow.
We have an industrial sized distillery expected to open by year end in 2023. So we've been conducting last year research and development. We were working with the University of Los Andes in Colombia. We analyzed the coffee byproduct waste or cascara and realized that it's high in sugars, high in antioxidants. It's been done in the past that it's been turned into a liquor product, even a vodka product. But we're not aware of anyone who owns coffee farm land at scale and is using the waste at origin to create another revenue stream and to create the volume that we're looking to do. At full capacity, we're expecting over 30,000 bottles of vodka to be produced per day from our industrial distillery from the waste of the coffee production. We have 2 wet mills that we're going to be using to create this waste. Each one processes 200,000 kilograms of coffee cherries daily. So that's 400,000 kilograms of coffee cherries processed per day, and we can use 200,000 kilograms of that to create alternative products such as vodka. So as we built out we opened our first wet mill in the end of 2021. And we soon realized, like, what are we going to do with all this waste? There's so much waste coming off of these machines. And then that's really kind of what triggered this idea and this initiative, but it's very much moving forward. We have some videos on our YouTube page of the distillery already installed, the test equipment. We have a whole series that we're releasing right now, piece by piece, to our network. And it's definitely, I would say, still in its infancy, but something that's well thought out and moving forward.
That's great. Thank you for going through that. I mean, I'm kind of excited about it. I think that's a really cool benefit of farming for coffee. I mean, I love coffee, but also, an extra revenue stream. I had a question about the inflation hedge you mentioned earlier. You said owning land and coffee is an inflation hedge. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. I mean, typically when you see inflation, things like real estate and commodities rise along with inflation because as labor costs rise and input costs rise on production, the cost of those goods rise. So it's a supply and demand mechanism that we're seeing. So as all of inflation started kind of taking off after COVID, a lot of the financial professionals are saying, hey, look, buy real assets, buy commodities. It's because they've been historically viewed as what's called a hedge against inflation because those costs rise with the cost of goods and services in the world. So being a landowner and being an owner of a scarce resource, those resources in an inflationary period, they usually become more scarce and more valuable, and then prices rise along with it. So what I mean by hedge against inflation is like as coffee prices rise with inflation, you are benefiting at being a producer at origin like we are. You benefit from that because you have relatively fixed costs on the input side. They rise slightly in certain cases, but not at the pace that the cost of the commodity can go up. That's really the main theme there. And a lot of our investors are real estate investors. And like you mentioned when we were first talking in the beginning, they're heavily allocated in U.S. assets. So most of our investors own property in the United States. They own their business in the United States. They have stocks and bonds here. Maybe they have some exposure overseas in like an index fund, but they don't have direct placements in portfolio companies in emerging markets. So a lot of our investors they're just like the people I was describing. They're business owners, they're entrepreneurs, they're investors in real estate. They love what we're doing because it's real asset heavy. As investor capital comes in, we're building out a balance sheet. So we're buying acres and acres of farmland, building out facilities that have inherent value. And the inflation is causing those to increase, of course, over time. One other thing that isn't so much inflation based, but it's more of like a foreign exchange function of what's kind of going on macroeconomically right now. The investment is coming in US dollars. So our investors commit US dollars to the project. We're buying farmland and building out assets in Colombia in Colombian pesos. Right now, the Colombian peso is approximately 5,000 to 1. It was sub 2,000 to 1 10 years ago, less than 10 years ago. That means is that the dollar goes twice as far than it did, more than twice as far than it did less than a decade ago. So dollars in the market are stronger and can buy more assets. But coffee is a commodity that's sold globally in US dollars. So we're able to enter the market here with stronger dollars and buy more land and have it stretch further. But then we're turning around and we're selling it globally in dollars on the back end. So there's arbitrage to be had there with the foreign exchange rate differentials that we're seeing. And our US investors love that. And then kind of like a third point on a similar topic is this investment is entirely uncorrelated with everything else in our investors' portfolios, which is why they love it as well. So it's like if properties go down, my whole portfolio is going down. Like, yeah, it might be less in Florida than it is in other parts of the country, but everything is very highly correlated. We even see that lately. Stocks and bonds used to be known as uncorrelated. Now it seems to be moving in tandem. And same with crypto markets and pick your asset class. It's moving in tandem and very much synchronized and in sync. So being in a different market, in a private company that's less liquid and has a very strong thesis and is uncorrelated with the rest of our investors' portfolios has resonated with them, and I think has led to the rise in commitments that we've had. In the last 2 years, we've grown from under $10 million of committed equity capital to north of 50. So I didn't mention that, but we've been around since 2017, but really in the last 2 years, we've more than 5x'd investor commitments in the project based on the work that we're doing and the thesis that we've been talking about.
Wow, it seems like a great asset class. I mean, inflation hedge, uncorrelated returns. I mean, that's everything what investors need, right? Reduce risk. And how are you able to meet these investors and raise 50 million? That's incredible. And congratulations on that, by the way.
Thanks, Vijay. We do it in a variety of methods. Our existing investors are our biggest supporters. So they're consistently becoming repeat investors. So more than half the monies in this particular funding round that we're in is from investors that have worked with us in the past. We also get referrals. So our investors refer us to other people. We're on podcasts such as these, so we get investors from these type of sources, people that reach out to us and want to learn more and eventually invest with us. We also present at certain conferences, so whether that's in person or virtual, we'll do certain educational webinars, we will do in-person events. It's a sum of all different efforts from a lot of different angles, and with the majority being repeat investment.
Got it. So with following the 80-20 principle, where do you think 80% of your investments come from? What 20% of activities give you 80% of investors?
Targeting a larger group that has where you can cast a wide net, and rather than pitching one investor at a time, being able to pitch a large group of investors through a group, whether it's a passive investing group or it's a mastermind or it's some sort of service provider that has a group of passive investors in one place, really identifying where these passive investors are that are looking for opportunities and getting in front of them in a wide mechanism. What doesn't work is trying to convince someone that's not interested in becoming an investor in anything to invest in your project. So where we find success is finding guys and girls who are actively looking for deals. They're actively looking for diversification. And I'd say that's where the large bulk of the group comes from.
I think that's really smart. Yeah. Instead of doing one-on-one, kind of target one to many, and it's just a better use of your time, a lot more efficient. I think that's a great takeaway from that. Awesome. Well, Josh, do you have a favorite book that you recommend for our listeners?
Let's see.
Could be related to coffee, could be related to alternative investments, or just something that you think has helped you get this far in your career.
It's totally unrelated, and you probably have heard this from a lot of people, but Rich Dad, Poor Dad changed my mindset out of college and really had me start thinking way out of the box compared to what I used to. Not just that, but like reading articles and things on the topic. But that book itself was really opened me to a whole series of books on personal development and thinking about things differently, getting out of the role as an employee into an employer and ultimately a business owner and then a passive business owner. That's a good mindset book for me. There's, of course, others, but none specifically that I could recommend on alternative investments. I could tell you a lot of what I know has been learned on the ground and from my colleagues at Legacy Group, sitting in on board meetings, driving forward the business by trial and error, actually like trying what works, seeing what does, what doesn't. There's no substitute to good old fashioned trial and error.
Hard work, yeah, just getting it done and seeing what works, what doesn't. Well, Rich Dad Poor Dad, I agree. I think that is the number one book I recommend to everyone. If you're listening to this podcast, you haven't read that book, definitely get it. I've read it probably 4 or 5 times. It completely changed my life and changed the way I view the world and kind of career choices and everything. So you're right about changing from employee to employer. Solid book. And lastly, Josh, could you tell us where our audience could get in touch with you and about your current funding round? Again, this is not a solicitation of securities. This is purely just educational and informational purposes only.
Yeah, sure thing, Vijay. Would love to get in touch with your listeners. You could find us on our website at legacy-group.co. You could also send us an email at investor.relations@legacy-group.co.
Perfect. I'll link all this in the show notes. Josh, thank you so much for your time.
Same to you, Vijay. Thanks so much. You have a great day.
Hey, it's Vijay. If you liked this video, you're going to love this video. Make sure you click it, leave questions in the comments, and I'm here to help however I can. Hope you have a great day.